Before we go into you, I would like to give the floor to Fons elders. We've heard you a couple of times before. Very highly valued philosopher with a long line of work in the Netherlands and beyond. Film Academy, Theatre School, Academy for Physical Education, Gerrit Rietveld Academy for Visual Arts, Academy for Architecture, Urban Planning and Landscape. There's nothing he doesn't know about. But he didn't know so much about Islam at a certain moment in his life, so he published this book, Islam Unknown, where he describes meetings with people like Esma Barlas, Nasser Abu Zaid, Abdullahi Ahmed Al-Naim, and others a few years ago. Today, we're asking you to give us a short reflection. You signed the DocP statement, but you're questioning mine, so you might have some questions about how we've been speaking about this. It's all yours. And you can use the microphone if you
Thank you, thank you. I ask Chris' permission to summarize what I would like to say in 4 brief points. The first one is about 1982. Sabra Shatila from this man, George Sluizer, he died last year in Amsterdam. He was buried in Amsterdam. I was at his funeral. George Sluizer made 3 documentaries about Palestinian families. One is called Home. He was in 1982, he wanted to enter Israel again, but didn't get any permission to enter. And the people said to him, the people in power, there is only one man who can give you the key to enter, and that is the signature of Ariel Sharon, who was in South Lebanon. So he went there, he got the signature, and now he turned around. He was with his back to the camera, the assistant and so on, and he walked away in the direction of 2 playing Palestinian children and shot them dead.
Sharon himself.
Yeah. And talking about it also in terms of this book, Hans Reiser asked him, but why did you shout at a clinic where Sharon was dead, practically dead, clinically dead, and why did you yell that he had to be killed in Auschwitz?
He should have been killed.
He should have been killed in Auschwitz. And then Sluizer, who was 30 years busy with Palestine, not showing the violence of Israel, his heart broke, and he said that Golda Meir said once, years ago, a Jew who does marry a non-Jew better would have stayed and killed in Auschwitz. So far, page 82. The second point I want to touch, but just touch, is the following. We are in the middle of a profound so-called paradigm shift. For those who don't have a clear idea what is a paradigm is a pattern of normative guiding ideas, which are mostly unconscious. Here, the back of your mind. A paradigm changes when space and time are changing. That's my own research, but that is solid. we are now at the end of the paradigm that arose around 1700, the so-called Newtonian worldview. And a paradigm shift always needs two potent factors, physical factors, but also normative factors, and a change of ideas. And our world is in turmoil, and we are in the middle, and already in the field of sciences and philosophy and psychology and so on, already since 100 years. Also, by the way, the visual arts, but not in the mass of the population, not in the humanities, and not in economy. That straight line, what's called progress, is a totally abstract time concept that is going to be destroyed, and it has to be destroyed, and the climate change will contribute to that destruction, because we have to return to the planets, to the seasons, and so on, which for the first time in our history, 300 years ago, by Isaac Barrow and Isaac Newton, were left aside when they defined for the first time in human history space and time. So we have to make a big circle back to a kind of ecological consciousness. Now the third point. And the third point hangs closely together with the transformation of paradigm. Because Israel has incorporated all or most of the most bad, in moral sense, intellectual sense, of the characteristics of the last 300 years. The superiority complex of the white people, the hidden 1,000-year-old anti-Semitic mentality against Jews and Arabs alike, since the Crusades and partly before, and with the culmination since 1448, 1492 and 1609 in Spain. And nationalism, which came from the top, needed to grasp the people in the big economic and social changes by educating them in a nationalistic spirit. And the last century was the export product, the ideological export product of Europe was its nationalism. Israel has sucked it up and is using it since the Second World War, in the sense that that ancient anti-Semitism, which was deeply Jewish, anti-Jewish. In 1903, the Paris people went into the streets with a big trial. Abou is now used for the Arabs and the Muslims. From there, this book. With other words, we are now in the middle of a fight which moves along non-violence, which has the preference of my heart, until the maximum method, Jahjah. And both are right. Because violence is a very dangerous mean to use, because it will affect you deeply in your own heart, soul and mind. But there is a big difference between defending your home, defending your children, and so on, against conquering the homes of somebody else and killing the kids of another. So violence is not violence as such, it means with what aim. So the people who practice non-violence must help all the other ones to keep their inner balance, to keep mind and heart in balance. So it is not an opposition, and therefore everybody can support the PDS. Everyone. Then finally, to conclude, very good friends came back from Israel, born in Jerusalem, and told me exactly 10 years ago, briefly before we went to Noam Chomsky for a televised interview which is in this book, he said to me, Fons, Israel is lost. It lost its soul. Now, the last question in the last sentence is, what could that mean? It lost its soul. There you go. Okay. A few months ago, this medal is from the Yad Vashem Foundation in Jerusalem. It carries.
I want to read this. And it's dedicated to Jan and Johanna Josefa Eldersborst.
It carries, and are my parents, it carries here in French language, whoever says alive saves the whole universe. Saves the whole universe. That is the ancient prophetic spirit of our Jewish tradition. If there is one state and community who is killing that tradition, it is the actual state of Israel, and many consciously and unconsciously of the Israeli Jews. And that is extremely painful. And it brings me to my conclusion that the greatest enemy of Israel is Israel itself. It is one great psychiatric clinic. And I may say, because I've been playing in Jerusalem exactly 30 years ago, in front of the Jahjah center where Eichmann was condemned till death. And I was playing there the Dying King. And I left on Friday, the evening of the Sabbath, to Tel Aviv because I couldn't stand the tensions anymore. And there I was in the house of an Israeli woman, friend of the actors and so on. And at midnight she went to her cabinet, got a passport with a German nomination, and said, when it goes from bed to work here, I will return to Germany. I think.
Fons Elders. Israel has lost its soul. Israel has become its own worst enemy. And the BDS is part of the campaign on the full scale from violent resistance to non-violent resistance. And about this resistance, about the BDS, about how to go ahead and how to go ahead for us here, people inspired by this whole afternoon. I will ask each of you one or two questions or pointers to help us ahead. Naomi, can I start with you? Okay. And I'm making it very practically immediately. You and yours in the Artists for Palestine have succeeded in getting more and more and more artists and artistic people, cultural people, to endorse the BDS campaign. In numbers we really don't see here yet. How do you do that, actually? Do you actually actively approach artists and ask them to sign and to act?
Okay, I'll answer it.
And I believe it's okay to use a microphone, yeah?
Well, I'll take it as a very practical question and tell you how it was done with Artists for Palestine. We prepared for months in advance. We worked very hard on formulating a wording which we thought gave no hostages to fortune, was not open to misinterpretation, and which was acceptable to everybody within a small group of activists who were working on this idea. So that the first step is you've got to get a formulation which you feel that you can defend. Then we spent many, many weeks approaching people that we knew. We started off with people like Carol Churchill, who's a well-known playwright who we knew was in support. She put it out to her friends. It went like this, very small scale initially, picking up people who we knew we could trust and who could approach others that they trusted. And I mean, obviously, you have to work with people who are very confident of the arguments, and this will be a very small group initially. Then, gradually we widened the group. We set ourselves a target. Some people wanted to say a critical mass. Some people wanted to say the critical mass should be 2,000. And it was going slowly, so we realised that this was probably an unrealistic critical mass before going public and making it possible for people to sign up online as a result of a public pronouncement. Now, unfortunately, and I would not wish this on you, but as I said in my presentation, the series of events which created a rush of people wanting to sign was mass Palestinian death. It was caste-led. And people just were queuing up to sign at that point. And that's what brought us to the figure of over 600, which allowed us to launch. Now, I hope that we will not have such an occurrence again. And you may have to take longer building up your critical mass. You'd have to decide what it is in terms of your population, obviously. It could be a smaller number in the Netherlands, having a smaller population. And once you feel confident that you have got a critical mass, then you can make a big public launch of it. And you will probably get quite a lot of press coverage if you've got a significant number of big names. Yeah, I mean, I could just end it there, but
we'll get back to that.
That's very practical.
Samir, to continue on this, you've been involved as well, of course. And during your heroic introduction a few hours ago, you said while convincing people to join up, you run, of course, into a series of classical counter-arguments. Can you tell us the most difficult argument that pops up and that you have to take down in order to get them on your side?
Yeah. I don't know about the single most difficult, because from my point of view, I don't think any of the counter-arguments are particularly persuasive. A lot of them are quite easy to reach for. They're kind of, people make a lot of unacknowledged assumptions about these kind of fairly meaningless sort of statements that they might be coming out with. I mean, to give one example, there's a musician called Thurston Moore. He's from a group called Sonic Youth, who achieved fairly sort of legendary status as a US sort of indie rock band. They split up a few years ago, and he now lives in London. And he's known for his progressive politics. And then it was announced that he was playing in Tel Aviv. And he's actually a neighbour of mine, and I know him, so I emailed him straight away, kind of furious, and he called me up straight away. And then ensued about, when he tells us, like, in Thurston's mind, it didn't take quite as long to turn him around. It did take a little while, and encountered various arguments. And looking back on it, I think that someone like Thurston and many other artists, I think what's going on is that they want us to support medias, they want to support Palestinians, they want to support justice, equality and freedom. But there's an awful lot of misinformation, there's an awful lot of propaganda. If you get all your information from the mainstream media, then you would probably think that actually Palestinians are occupying Israel rather than the other way around. And then there's a lot of discussion about supposed nature of Israel's relationship with LGBT communities, something that we call pinkwashing. And so it felt like there's a number, when you're speaking to us, there might be a number of barriers, but rather than get frustrated with people and think that they're coming out with kind of Zionist arguments, I think it's important to remember that these might be questions they've wondered about for years, and they were just desperate to talk to someone about it in a way, to find out. They say, well, what about Hamas? What about Tel Aviv as an LGBT haven? What about this and that and the other? And actually, you've got to be very patient. You've got to go through it all with everyone. And a lot of stuff, I mean, it does all come back. It's not just about the current occupation thing. It's about the Nakba and the ongoing Nakba. And, you know, this is your chance to speak to people, speak to artists and to artistic institutions and all kinds of other people about these issues that go very much unnoticed otherwise. So I hope that kind of it doesn't directly answer your question.
Well, the main thing you're saying is have no fear in approaching them, even if they're not your neighbor. And the second is take your time, because I'm sure you're talking to people, gifted people, who maybe don't have all the knowledge that is out there, but who are serious and very well capable of creating their own logic.
Yeah.
And that takes time.
It does. It's a very time-consuming kind of endeavour. It can be. I mean, to kind of follow up from what the question that Naomi was just answering, that kind of proactive work that Artists for Palestine have been doing in the UK for the last few years, and has also happened in a few other places around the world, that kind of proactive work is incredibly important. It's very patient, it's very time-consuming. What often happens is someone will be announced to cross the picket line. They'll be announced to play in Tel Aviv, and then it's much more of a frantic kind of rush to spontaneous campaign kind of pops up, and if it's a radio or if it's a private conversation, usually it's both. And so it kind of forces the issue, and it forces those individuals in those groups, those music groups, to actually kind of come face to face with some real politics for a change, rather than the kind of fairly kind of vague, meaningless kind of statements about.
What is your experience when somebody is about to cross the red line, when somebody is about to go and perform in Tel Aviv or in a state-sponsored institution? When you get them, the ones that you get to back down, will they then also take the next step and endorse the campaign?
That's a really, really important question. I mean, there's a very widespread silent boycott out there. There'll be many, many prominent artists that you will never hear of who just simply refuse the gigs, and that's that. They don't talk to anyone about it, they don't engage with people. And we do, of course, try to do as much proactive work as possible. But usually if people do cancel, it will be blamed on logistics, it will be blamed on this, that, the other. And you can often tell when it's absolutely false, because the Israeli promoters come out with 3 different reasons in the same day. But in the case of Thurston Moore, he did follow it up with a very strong and explicit endorsement of BDS, and I worked closely with him for a number of weeks to try to make sure that happened. But that's pretty rare. But I think, particularly in the UK, with the work that Artists for Palestine have been doing over the last few years, I think the tide is starting to turn. I think the logic of something like the Artists for Palestine pledge is that you're not asking people to stick just their neck out on the line individually, but to stand together as a collective. Yep. And we're going for too long, but just to say, because it was mentioned earlier about Roger Waters, what Israel and its advocates are trying to do is make an example. So they're not targeting absolutely every supporter of BDS, every prominent musician, artist, supporter, but they're really focusing their efforts on Roger Waters. And if you look at the Israeli media, these cultural boycott campaigns, Israeli media normally it's reported, oh, Roger Waters and his BDS movement has said something here. There's very little sense that this is coming from Palestinian civil society, that it might have widespread support. It's just the bogeyman.
Yeah. Haim, to follow up on this different dimension of the whole struggle, as Naomi and Samir and others have mentioned, the Brand Israel campaign is kind of a counter force towards the BDS campaign. You said here, you will not speak to Zionists, there's no sense. But do you engage with the Brand Israel campaign in any way?
Well, this is a very loaded question, as you know. The first question behind it is, what is a Jew nowadays? Now, we know what a Jew was. A Jew in the Arab world, or a Jew in Poland, or a Jew in Britain, they knew what they were. And they were not Zionists. I've talked about that. So, at one point in time, until the Second World War, Jews were either culturally connected, say the Jews of Germany, the Jews of Britain, most of them, the Jews of New York and environs, and other communities were connected by religion. The Jews of Germany were not really very religious. Yeah, I'm talking about the 20th century. So different Jewish communities were connected by different systems of identity. And they were not similar. They were not connected by ethnicity. Just look at me. Do I connect ethnically to, say, someone from Yemen? Obviously, Shlomo Zand has done a lot of work, and he's not alone, proving, I think beyond any doubt, that the ethnic origin of Jews in Europe is very different. And genetically, they actually prove that. So I think that's the first question, that until a certain point, to be Jewish was a simple matter. Now Zionism has totally changed that. And Israel has changed it even. So we haven't got time, so I'll just go to the point. The great danger of Zionism is that it takes a religious and national, a cultural, a geographic, and so on, layers of identity which actually don't belong with each other historically, and actually combines them into an animal that is not in the zoo. There is no Jewish nation in history. This is very simple. It's not radical to argue this. There is a Jewish religion, there are Jewish identities which are communal, but a Jewish nation? There was probably a small tribe of Hebrews. I mean, just read the work of Shlomo Zand. He's excellent on this. So when Zionism starts looking for identity, they have to go back 2,000 years to a Hebrew nation, which was really a tribe, reinvent it, and of course add to it military. And now also capitalism is part of this. I think you were related to this before, that those layers of identity, because they're overexposed over each other, they are creating an identity which is very, very difficult to fight. It's not real, but people believe in it.
So how do you go about that?
Well, I think, first of all, you disprove it. The three authors that Naomi so well described before, who supported Zionism totally uncritically, never would dream in their life to go and live in Jerusalem. This is a very simple matter. I mean, the Jews in Holland that are supporting Israel to the hilt are not going to go there. Most of the Jews are not going to live there because they know what it is. But they feel pressurized, and this is since the Holocaust. So I think what we need to do is, first of all, to analyze this lie, to undermine it, and actually to confront Jews in different countries by their own background, historical background, and say to them, you are not Israeli, they actually are not Jewish. That's the point I got from what you said before. You called it Israel has lost its soul. I don't think it had one. Israel didn't have a soul. I think Judaism in some point might have had a soul, but not Israel. Zionism didn't have a soul. It was a collective settler colonial project, and it stayed that way.
Thank you so much, Haim. I think somebody should call Mr. Bidi, because he's really having some bad news coming his way if we listen to all of this. John, I was listening to you, and you describe and show very vividly how let's say you can you can put your whole personality into the work you're making without losing the power of the message. And I was also thinking about Arjan Barel, the theater director and manager who spoke out earlier, I mean, I like his work and not like his work. He's a great guy, actually. But this is so Dutch, maybe English, I don't know. It's so Dutch to try to separate the message that you're putting into your work and the public stance that you take as an artist, as a public figure. And he wanted to keep those two separate, out of courtesy to the audience, as he said. And I take him very seriously. How do you address that if you're trying to get people on the side of the campaign? He's no longer here, unfortunately, otherwise we would include him.
It did at the time, it seemed to be when I was hearing him say that, I just thought, he hasn't got to the point yet where, in my view, where the pennies drop, that there's a difference between your artistic impulse, the outcome of your art and what you're delivering and showing to the world, and a tactic to make something to put something really bad under pressure. I mean, to me, it's really clear that they're quite separate lines of thinking in a way. I can understand why he doesn't want his work to be muddled in people's mind. You know, he wants a clear, pure response to his work as his work. We can all agree with that. But boycott as a tactic is quite a separate matter, quite separate. And I mean, I don't have.
So how do you take away that fear of his that they will be mixed in the eyes of the audience?
I don't think. I mean, to me, I would like to take the issue much bigger, really, and that's kind of how I operate. And I think, you know, we talk about artists for Palestine, and it's obviously, in the time that it's been operated, it's been hugely effective. But, you know, part of me thinks, well, what's wrong with Humans for Palestine? Why can't we be allowed to respond as human beings? And you know, the point that Fons made earlier about paradigms. I mean, that's a lot of the time the kind of territory that I inhabit and try to think things through as well. I mean, we are talking about, I mean, you know, boycotts that are carried out by governments, and we see them all the time, you know, Russia being the latest. These are purely political. I mean, they have nothing to do with legality or morality whatsoever. And people need to understand that this is you know, if we're talking about paradigms, we're talking about what the stakes are here. It's almost impossible to overstate the stakes when it comes to the fulcrum of this Israel-Palestine issue. I mean, I've been watching these Herzliya conferences year after year, and you've got these people who are trying to defend the indefensible and protect the untenable. They're trying to change the whole laws of war. They're trying to reconfigure our entire human morality about things that it should be instinctive for us are being subverted. So I think that when you put things at the level that they're really happening at, then the idea of a boycott at a human level, not some political or even specific members of the community, is a no-brainer to me.
Okay. Thank you. Dyab, during your statement earlier, you were very gracious to the BDS campaign in the sense that you told us how yes, it is part of the wider struggle, but you're obviously on the more maximalist critique, as you said. But you know, you're gonna go back to Belgium later on and leave us poor Dutch here behind. What can you recommend us to do as excellent mobilizer that you are, what can you recommend us to do to mobilize Dutch support for the BDS campaign?
not bad. Well, you know, I think you're doing quite fine to start with. I think if I compare the mobilization of BDS in the Netherlands to Belgium, I think the Netherlands is quite active compared to the Belgian BDS. However, what we have in Belgium, and we're trying to build for you now in the Netherlands as well, is a broader movement that are intersectional in its struggles, within which Palestine is one barricade among other barricades. And we believe that through that strategy, which is not actually a strategy, it's a commitment to actually the reality we live in this world. And here I come also to the idea of, you know, we're living in a sort of a twilight zone where the old is not dead yet and the new is not born yet, and a lot of things are sliding in all directions, and it's you have paradigm shifts, and these are dangerous times, but these are also very good times for change and very good times for contesting the status quo and contesting what a mainstream is considering an obvious state of nature, which is not, obviously, because it's all built, it's all constructed, and it's all the result of balance of power. So what we're trying to build in Belgium is a movement that goes beyond the separate causes, but combines them all. This is not an alternative for the specialized movement. So I'm not saying that we should drop the categories and we should all melt into one broader movement. What I'm saying is we need to keep BDS, we need to keep all the specific organizations working on specific issues, but we need also to create a movement that works on everything at the same time, and that tries to have, that has the arrogance to say, look, we are the new mainstream, you know? You are getting marginalized now, you know? It's like Mahmoud Darwish says in one of his poems, you know, I will you know, encircle my blockade, or I will blockade my blockade, you know? Like, there's no way backwards, you know? I think now this can go beyond a metaphor. We are living at times where we can be more ambitious. And maybe the only advice within that, because I was talking to Sonia on the break, and you were telling me that you were in a dilemma, whether to, for them, for such an event, whether to really publicize it and mobilize for it, or to keep it low profile. You know, you were really wondering about this thing. My humble advice would be, maybe in that light, is to be more offensive a bit in this. As to, yes, let's seek the controversy, let's seek the confrontation, because now we're not just sending signals anymore. We could actually shake things around, you know. And at the end of the day, you know, we might lose this fight. But it's
still in it.
But we're still in it. It's important also to know that we might win it. You know, it's like in football they say, you know, Arabs used to say often when they play football, like with a lot of other things, you know, it's about participating, you know. Yeah, but because they were impressed by the opponents. We should drop that mentality in football and other things. We should drop it. We're in it to win it.
Good. We're in it to win it. It's your humble advice to us is to be less humble.
Yeah.
Now, I keep a close eye on the clock, but I would like to hear from the DocP people, Sonia, Linda, Sue, about your plans, your next steps, including all of us here. Start with you.
Yeah. Well, I was going to throw out a question, really, but I mean, I've not been involved in DocP that long, but as far as I can tell, we're still at the beginning of a process, and the purpose of this conference is to energise and empower and motivate people and to kick off a debate. So this is not a one-off, folks. This is the start, and we want to bring you with us on a journey, and we want to give more voice to Palestinian people, because I think part of the problem all the time is that Palestinian voices are not heard. People who talk about the Palestinian people themselves are often silenced. And we want to engage more Dutch people. Instead of importing all these people from England, we're very, very welcome. But next time, let's have some more Dutch people speaking. But seriously, You see, we did invite a lot of Dutch people, and some of them I think genuinely couldn't come, but some of them I suspect were a little bit scared. And it's not surprising, because the Israel lobby can be very intimidating. And you look around, you see people like Steven Salaita lose his job, you know. Norman Finkelstein, he didn't even support BDS, but he lost his job, you know, because he said a few rude things about Israel. And people are scared. They're afraid of losing their jobs, losing their funding, or not getting a job, or not getting funding. You know, how do we break through that fear barrier? Because, for God's sake, if a 5-year-old Palestinian child can look a soldier in the face and make him drop his gaze, what is stopping us? You know, what is our excuse? But, you know, how do we help each other to find the courage to speak out?
Okay. Great, thanks. So fearless, next step, including more of the Dutch people, the equivalents of the English friends, the British friends we have here. Who else from the DocP circle about next steps that we're going to take? So? Sorry,
yes, actually, I'm in complete agreement with Dyab that we have to take the bigger and more controversial steps. And radicalization does not mean killing, it means coming out for what you believe in. And yeah, I think the BDS has not been forthright. It's been hiding.
Here.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that time is over.
Yes.
Sonia, this morning you actually, before this whole thing, you came back with a number of people from the British Embassy where you offered them a protest against the commemoration of the Balfour Declaration, and that the UK should take its responsibility there. But now, apart from the other steps that have been described by Sue and Linda, you also have a very practical one that we could do right now, no?
Well, I had it, but I don't have it anymore, because I discussed it with some people. But I can clarify what the issue was about. It was actually about a conference that's going to be held next week, a 3-day conference on Palestinian prisoners. And the word got out, and there were some Zionist individuals and I think a Jewish group who immediately raised their voices and of course identified it as a terrorist.
It's going to take place here in The Hague, yeah?
No, it's in the Rijswijk actually.
Oh, nice.
And we feared that the venue, we thought that the venue had actually cancelled it out of fear that they were to be identified with this, but apparently that's not the case. But I think what it points to is where we're at as a movement, and with what we are confronted as a movement. I mean, I said to Dyab during the break, you know, it feels as if we have to act in a kind of covert way so as not to attract aggressive people and to be stabbed to death in the media. And but I feel that the time really has come that we become more rude. And I liked the term humans for Palestine. And I think I said this in my introductory word. You know, we've been working with consumers, we work with the business sector, we work with all sorts of sectors. And now we are hoping to work with a very vocal and sector which is rich in expression, and we're really hoping from the artists that they will, let's say, enrich our speech, and as very respected people in our society also give us, you know, powerful, I wouldn't so much say backing, but support and comradeship. And so I'm really hoping to work with more artists, and this exercise, which we started in the beginning of the year, has been very enriching to us, because we have come across many new individuals and people who said, well, we actually agree with you and we'd like to work with you. and it's been tremendously encouraging. So what I'm really hoping for is that we can, continue with that momentum, and we've decided that we're going to continue the project into the next year. We have an exhibition coming up with visual artists, and I don't think we can let this go. I think we really have to continue building this movement to network with humans for Palestine.
Thank you so much. Okay, so less humble, more radical, truthful, resilient,
and joyful,
fearless, joyful. And if a civilized lady like Sonja Zimmerman says it, we should be more rude. I think we have a great future ahead of us. At least we have a lot of power behind us to contest the indefensible. I want to thank, for now, John, Haim, Dyab, Naomi, Samir and Fons for your real, true inspiration. I felt it. Thank you so much.